So, Professor, one question I have, and I think a lot of voters have, is what are the markers that we would know that you've achieved your objectives, can turn it over to the vice president, and the Supreme Court can't overturn what you've just done?
Mm-hmm. So we've proposed what we call a Citizen Equality Act, because the point that when you recognize it's quite amazing, it's quite simple. If we could just get a democracy back where we were all equal citizens, we could crack the corruption in Washington. So the Citizen Equality Act has three parts. One radically changes the way campaigns are funded. Core part of it follows an idea that Jim Rubens, who ran for Senate here in the Republican Party last election cycle, proposed, which is a voucher idea. So give everybody vouchers they can use to fund campaigns. And then the candidates don't spend all their time raising money from the tiny fraction of the 1%. That's one change. Second change is end the political gerrymandering, where politicians pick their voters rather than the voters picking the politicians. Right now there's 75 million Americans who have no effective representation because they live in a safe seat and they're in the minority party. And number three, end the stupid ways in which we make it hard for people to vote, right? It ought to be equally easy for people to vote. And by holding elections on Tuesdays when most people have to work and can't afford childcare so they can go out to the polling place, it just makes no sense. We ought to be holding elections at a time and protecting the right of access to the ballot in a way that guarantees that everybody has an equal right to vote. Those three changes would crack the corrupted lobbying system in Washington and give us democracy responsive to the citizens.
So, but what happens? Wouldn't power shift to large corporations, large unions, buying airtime to articulate their positions in such ways that the politicians can't ignore?
Yeah, so I don't think the problem is speech published to the public. I think the problem is the way candidates raise money. So this is what Donald Trump's talking about, right? If you are raising money, as Jeb Bush is, at $1 million a pop for your SuperPAC, you can't help but at the back of your mind be wondering, how will my decision about the Keystone Pipeline affect the willingness of those billionaires to give money to my SuperPAC, right? That can't escape you because you're human, or I hope you're human. That's just the way humans function. So I think the problem is to change the way they're raising money. And if you do that, you give them a chance to be independent. They're not going to certainly, with guarantee, be independent, but you at least give them the opportunity to decide these issues in a way that reflects their voters. Now, you're right. We could imagine the system changing. So if everybody had a voucher, you can imagine, the NRA standing up and say, send all your vouchers to the NRA so we can elect. And in my view, that's democracy. That's what democracy is supposed to be. If you've got to rally 1 million people to your side, more power to you. What I'm against is a system where you have to rally 10 lobbyists to your side. That's the system we've got right now that we've got to change.
One last question. So, we're looking at this, and you talked about not getting in the polls. How do we know that sort of this won't shift, like the externality of this is we move from sort of an elite of billionaires to an elite of media companies?
Well, I think the media companies have got to think about what a reformed system looks like for them. There are people who are talking about getting money out of politics. Like, let's just stop spending money on politics. That's not my position. We spend more money advertising soap every year than we do advertising to elect a president. And I think presidents are more important than soap, right? So I'm not against money in the system. I'm not against people having an effective way to communicate that. And that means I'm not against the media companies who will be in the business of facilitating that communication. What I'm against is a system where candidates are so focused on the 400 families who have given half the money in this election cycle so far. And what that is a focus on the way we raise money. So if we raise money from everybody, then spend it however they want to spend it, right? That's not my problem. My problem is if you're raising it from 400 people, you are not a democracy. You're a banana republic democracy. You're not an American democracy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.